around helping organizations understand what people think. I call it people data, really. There's lots of talk around big data and smart data and Internet of Things and all that kind of stuff. What's really important, and the area we focus on, is helping people understand, or organizations understand what people think. And that covers market research and voice of customer. But it's fascinating. The biggest area, the hottest topic at the moment is around this topic we're talking about today, of what employees think, helping organizations really engage and know what employees think. And there's lots of exciting and fun areas we work in around this, with mobile applications and communities and all this kind of great stuff. But it always comes back to the heart of it, which is this annual engagement survey. So I think it's a great topic, and it's clearly a very engaging one, given the number of people who are signing up today. Why it's important may be worth a quick mention. And on the screen, you can see this report from Deloitte, and I think probably everyone's read some of this. And the figure down there, about 87% of organizations cite culture and engagement as one of the top challenges. I think it's almost a level up from this as well. If you look at the report that came out from FT earlier in the year about what CEOs are focused on, and it always used to be customers. The biggest thing was customers. Whereas it switched, certainly over the last year or two, into being HR and employee relationship issues that are the biggest topics for CEOs: retention, recruitment, and so on. So I think within that context, it's understandable as to why engagement is so important, gets so much focus. And it's not new, so it's been around for a long time. I think you can see on the screen here, we've got a brief history of employee engagement. And I think the derivation of it, or the root of it, came from way back in military days. So you had the control and sort of command and control elements to it back in the sort of post-war period. And then it moved through into these things like employee satisfaction, and we started thinking about managers, and then there's a lot more talk about moving into engagement rather than satisfaction, and now we're moving into empowerment and mobilization and impact of millennials, all these things. But essentially we haven't got it right. The Gallup figures in the middle, you see those banded around a lot, but clearly we don't have around the world a heavily engaged workforce. And you've got to say, well, why is that? The annual engagement survey is clearly only a measure of things. It's not going to in itself solve the problems, but we have to question sort of what is the core of the issues here. And equally, there's plenty of examples of where it does go right. At Questback, we have over 1,000 organizations who we support and help run annual engagement surveys and other employee insight activities. And there's some fantastic examples of best practice in there. And we'll talk about some of those a bit later on. So we have to ask the question of what's been going wrong, and what is it, what are the issues we need to fix, and how we can fix them. And I know Ollie's going to talk a little bit about how we can fix some of them, and there are some good examples there. But I just thought I'd do one screen here and summarize a few of the kind of anecdotes and snippets that we hear from Questback customers or prospects when we first start talking to them about issues they have. And the ones that stand out for me, I think, actionable insight is this phrase that you hear up at the top left. The survey in itself, or any kind of employee insight, it's the value it brings is only identifying actions you need to take. And I think there's a really recurring theme around that. Equally, the one just to the right there about siloed data. You see so many organizations who are running lots of different exercises and different departments doing different surveys and so on, but they don't get pulled together. So I think some of these you see recurring. I don't know, Callum, from your point of view, if you see these from HR Grapevine members.
Yes, no, they all seem to ring true, actually. A lot of the HR directors that I speak with, it seems like there's a lot of time invested in this one giant annual project, and it becomes almost, I think there's almost a lot of resentment towards it, because they put all this time and effort in, and sometimes it doesn't necessarily bring a return on investment in terms of all of the time and things that are invested into it. You know, for 2 months, it could be 3 months, where they're working towards this goal. They get the data, and then, as you can see by some of these, you know, these speech bubbles on the screen, you know, sometimes the data is hard to quantify. Sometimes it's in silos, you know, and I think that's a big issue, because, you know, I'm sure Ollie will echo this, is that, you know,
I think people often see it very difficult to see the wood for the trees. I think often surveys are suffered from what I call survey creep, where sort of people add in questions because they want to find stuff out, and it gets a little bit out of control. I've seen a fantastic one. Good example was, you know, please rate the quality of your telecoms on an engagement survey. So it's sometimes they can just get a little bit non-strategic and hence disengaging.
And I love your phrase, Ollie, which we put on here as, you know, the last one there, reasons for change. Frankly, we're bored. And
yeah, we were talking earlier, just before the webinar. There is some seriously passionate debate, particularly on LinkedIn at the moment, and there's no doubt there's increasingly sceptical talk about the annual engagement survey. Admittedly, you know, some of this is sort of PR driven by people wanting to, you know, promote new approaches, but nonetheless, there's still some really strong arguments with genuine concerns that need to be discussed. So, you know, and I think this has got in the press recently, of course, with these high-profile dumping of the engagement survey, the annual engagement survey by KPMG, focused, of course, by their sort of commercial focus on evidence-based HR. So, I mean, I'm seeing three sort of lines of thought coming through some of these debates. I think, first of all, there's with the rise of social media and a sort of new generation of workforce, many argue that feedback needs to be much more agile in the moment rather than annually and having to wait, you know, 2-3 months for the results to come through. I think, secondly, I think some are questioning whether engagement surveys are simply not delivering the sort of promised business performance results. So you hear people calling it a pseudoscience, you know, doubtful claims, you know, a right muddle over causation and correlation and so on. And the fact that, you know, people are arguing, people are making an industry out of this just to make money, and it's not actually adding value, and sort of more robust, you know, evidence-based HR is the way forward. And I think, frankly, I think it's also around freshness. I think a lot of companies have been doing these surveys for quite a few years now, and frankly, they're a little bit bored and want to try something different and exciting. I'm not sure whether these resonate with you both.
Yeah, well, we've actually just got a question through that said, and I think it's a very good point, is that data can often be skewed when only the disengaged complete the survey. So how can you avoid this happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of this is encouraging and really high take-up rates. So in the companies I've worked for, it tends to be above 90%, so I don't think you necessarily have that problem. But I think that you will get that problem of people not taking part if they've done it for a few years and nothing happens, and that's something we'll talk about later. So if people, you know, if you're asking questions and nothing's happening to result, you're disengaging people.
Yeah, and I think that's right. That challenge of the missing middle, almost, you see in places where, you know, people who are super engaged contribute all the time and loads of great ideas. People who are incredibly disengaged are happy to moan. But the people in the middle, who are typically the ones who can really make a difference, you often do have a missing middle. And I'd agree with Ollie. They have to see action coming from it in order to incentivize them really to respond. And you can be a little bit clever in how you use the data and interpret it to apply some filters so you don't skew the results to people who are constantly chipping away about the same point.
I guess the other thing is the actual survey itself. I mean, we were talking, like you said, prior to the session about sometimes it can be 100 odd questions. It can be in a format that isn't very, you know, friendly to, you know, it doesn't make people want, like you said, frankly we're bored is one of the three reasons there. And it's, you know, to ask an employer to give good, honest feedback can be such a big ask, and for them to look at this giant form or something, I can imagine they're thinking, oh no, I can't be bothered.
It's a really good point. I mean, companies are putting so much work into, engaging their people, through citing brands and purposes and values. And then when people come to the engagement surveys, too often it's in sort of what I call corporate blah, and it kind of seems totally disconnected to all the exciting stuff that's going on elsewhere in the business. So I think there's definitely a trend towards aligning engagement surveys with the language of the company, the values and the strategy, and also asking questions in an engaging way, frankly, that gets people excited and think, oh, that's a bit different, that's a bit provocative. Well, I'm going to have a go answering that.
We've done one recently, which is entirely mobile-based using gamification, and it's more around like filling in words. So the sentences, at work I feel, fill in a blank, and you choose the word from drop-downs, and it has to be right for the culture of the organisation, but just doing it in a way which is a bit more fun.
Engaging.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're going to give us some examples and hints and tips, I think.
So I definitely hear all these concerns, and I agree with so many of them about the annual engagement survey. Yet, despite this, I definitely think in the majority of organisations it shouldn't die. Made better and more effective, absolutely. But I really don't think it's a good idea to take it away in most organisations. So I wanted to kind of put a few reasons out there for that. So Paul's picking a slide. So I think when we go to speak to organisations, we find all these people saying our HR directors are speaking to, the survey's too long, it's disconnected from the strategy, and most common of all, nothing happens with the results. And as I said before, by asking questions of your employees, you're setting an expectation that something will happen as a result of that question. And if it doesn't, you lose credibility and trust, that kind of say-do gap. And so, ironically, this means that engagement survey is becoming a disengagement tool. So, there's heaps of stuff you can do to ensure that you actually get value from your engagement survey, and it does deliver enhanced performance. And I'll come to that later. But fundamentally, the engagement survey done right shouldn't just be an exercise in measurement. Most importantly, it's actually an action tool. So it's a focused way, I think, of bringing up your employee voice, then stimulating those really powerful, focused conversations, and we've had some amazing ones on the basis of the survey data, that then leads to action, both in terms of sort of line manager and team effectiveness, and also, frankly, getting the ideas and the energy of your people focused on your strategy and your business objectives. And I think the key thing I see time and time again with engagement surveys is the mistake of kind of keeping the accountability of the actions at kind of divisional level. I know, and that's important. You've got to listen to some of the systemic issues, but its key is to drive the accountability down to line manager level. You upskill your line managers, you share your learnings, you raise the bar, you tell stories about how great teams are run, and you create this culture where engagement is a fundamental expectation of anyone who manages people at whatever level. So critically, this is around using the annual survey results, not just once as a one-off, but throughout the year. So we used to use them in one-to-ones, in team meetings, and the conversation was kept alive. This wasn't just a discrete process that happens once a year. And this kind of team-level engagement and line manager accountability, it doesn't happen by magic. You've got to have an organised program, upskilling, coaching, mid-year pulse, and then also got to have consequences. So the key thing here is that if, as a line manager, year on year, you're not making an effort to engage your team, you're not taking these upskilling opportunities, there's got to be some accountability for that, and also some recognition when people do it really well. So to me, it's around using the survey tool as a powerful way of bringing up the issues, having really great conversations at a team level, following through on them. And when you do that, the impact can be phenomenal. If you don't, if you just leave it up here, for a month every year, of course it's not going to work and engage people. This is where it'd be great to get the views of Paul and Callum as well. So this to me is where I'm seeing an increasing trend of people looking at their engagement surveys and going, actually, although some of the key drivers, additional drivers of engagement around empowerment, accountability, listening to your people are really important. What's really important is engaging your people in your company's strategic priorities, so not just a generic set of questions. So, for example, if a priority in your company is to improve customer service by improving collaboration and handoff between departments, when calls get lost between departments, or documentation, so network effectiveness, then if you have a really, really powerful question in your survey around this, with the right tools to back it up, then you can stimulate really important conversations between departments, within teams, that actually make a genuine difference to the customer experience, and frankly how frustrated we are at work as well. So we've done the same with many companies, really provocative questions that get people engaging in the strategy and values and so on. So Paul, that's something that you're seeing more in your companies asking about.
Yeah, no, indeed.
Yeah. So really, I think this hinges so much on what engagement is. So is it, how happy and motivated and energized people are when they come to work? Their willingness to go the extra mile and so on. Yes, it is. But it's also, how engaged they are with the company's strategic objectives. So I see engagement, how motivated people are when they come to work, and how on board we are with where the organisation is going and its performance objectives. So maybe we need to rename it strategic engagement. But whatever you call it, the point is that engagement isn't an end in itself. You have to be engaged in something, and ultimately when you come to work, it has to be the company's purpose, strategy, and so on. So you could theoretically come to work and be highly engaged. You've got a fabulous boss, brilliant teammates, and you've got brilliant pet projects. But if those aren't actually helping, add money to the bottom line and put it in the same direction, then the company's wasting its engagement investment.
Yeah, and I think that's been a real drawback of the whole engagement score and benchmark culture that's grown up around engagement, where it becomes the end and almost a target rather than a measure. Yeah.
I think it's not just a measure, it's an action tool. I really like to think of it as an action tool. It's got some great questions that drive action.
It's like the old thing about weighing a pig. If you weighing a pig won't make it fatter, and measuring it doesn't actually drive any benefit. It's taking the action afterwards. Great.
So I just want to talk a little bit about case study, and feel free to ask questions on this. So this was at RSA, which is a company that's done tremendous work around employee engagement, still is. So RSA, when it first started its engagement journey, had incredibly low levels of engagement. The company had just been around the sort of near bankruptcy experience, and engagement was taken really seriously by the leadership team. So we put in place a whole engagement program and won all sorts of awards for getting world-class levels of engagement. But we got to the stage where we were getting this year on year, and we really wanted to align the engagement approach much more with the company's strategy. So we had a new brand, a customer obsession we called it, new values, and a much bigger focus on engaging our people as brand deliverers, essentially, to get those business outcomes. So what we did is we'd also become quite focused on the score, as inevitably as you do. So we actually took a new approach, which was to ditch the score. We had sentiment sliders. We ditched sort of generic questions and got our own questions in our own language and linked to our brand and values, and these weren't kind of corporate laugh type questions. They were questions that we'd involved our people in helping create. And we also had a much bigger emphasis on what we called shout-outs. So previously we just had a couple of options to give your actual feedback. So we'd ask questions like, in your department, do you think things are done as efficiently and brilliantly as they could be? And people go, I know, we'll do this and this and this and this, and you get seriously good debate. And suddenly our engagement action planning sessions just became so much more alive and energetic. We got hundreds and hundreds of shout-outs across the organisation, and from this, combined with a really focused way of getting those actions into goals, we started to drive business improvement off the back of it. So it's a kind of a new way, really short survey, linked to the business objectives, quite adaptable. We could change it year on year, and start also linking it to other parts of the business data. But it was a fantastic way of refreshing, still an annual engagement survey, but just a different way of doing it.
There was a couple of things I remember from that, Ollie. One was you had the shout-ups as well as the shout-outs.
Yeah, so a lot of actions from an engagement survey can be solved at a team level, and that's really important to have that philosophy. So there's loads of stuff we can do in our department of 50 or our team of 20. We don't just want to go, oh, that's not, we can't solve this, that's for our senior managers to do. It's about empowering people to take action. But obviously some areas, whether it's, we've got an issue with IT systems, or we've got an issue in the handoff between this major function over here and that one, they need sort of more senior level engagement. So we developed what we called shout-ups. So, and the team would agree on, this wasn't a question of getting 100 shout-ups. The teams would focus on the 2 or 3 areas that most matter to them in their action planning sessions, and then they would shout them up to senior leaders and ask to be involved in solving them. So a hugely great way of kind of getting people engaged and involved with senior leadership in solving these things at grassroots level.
Yeah, I remember seeing that work really well. And the other thing that struck me was I remember reading the question sets, and I think you were trying to bring people along with this change and make it clear to them that this was a new approach. And if I remember correctly, the first question on the survey was, how are you feeling today?
Yeah, I mean, that's just you see that kind of thing on lots of apps and stuff as well, but this was then an introduction to get people to think, what's different? And the whole way that the whole thing was communicated, we want to say, people filling out the survey, are they excited? And actually we saw people doing it at their desks, typing away. Some people were writing an essay because they were so into it. And it was just such a big difference between the kind of tick this, tick this, tick this in some survey approaches.
Yeah, great.
I've got a question come through, and it's about the frequency. So it says, is it best to keep the survey annual, or allow a longer period, say maybe 1.5 to 2 years, to ensure in-depth analysis of results, action planning and implementation of planned actions before the next survey takes place?
Well, I've got a view on that. So 2 points. The first one being, I think, annual. So provided it's the right survey, of course, but annual. And the reason being is that I think done right, you start incorporating the actions into goals and plans for the year. And I think if it's linked to the cycle of your annual kind of goal setting, it can be a really powerful tool. Also would recommend sort of a mid-year pulse just to keep the energy going. So how are we doing our actions? Are we following through and all this kind of stuff? That said, and I think we come to talk about it later, I think in conjunction with the annual survey, I think there is definitely a part for sort of more in the moment measurement of engagement, particularly around sort of periods of change, but we'll come to that later.
So you wouldn't say any longer than a year?
Every company has their own way of doing things, but generally speaking, when we're talking to clients, because we want to link it to actions, and there's no reason why that you can't keep the same action plan, some elements from it over a couple of years in a team. We're building on this, we're doing quite well, we need more to do. So you don't just have to ditch it, and this is the shiny new thing for this year. So you can kind of keep the actions building.
Okay.
No, and I think I might be stating the obvious here, but I think there is a massively important point that your annual engagement survey shouldn't be the only lever. If it is, your engagement of your people will fail, and almost engagement becomes that really boring transactional thing at the beginning. A process. And frankly, if you took the survey away, if you've just focused on it, it will just all dissipate in a matter of months anyway. So, for example, you also, this is where internal comms comes in. You need to work really hard on alignment, which is a key to strategic engagement. Are you getting your people excited about where your company is going, and what they can do individually to make this happen? So this is where connecting not just rationally with the left brain, but emotionally connected with that right brain. So I know that you've got a conference on that soon. So it's that emotional connection. So work on creating a purpose-led organisation, strong strategic narrative, strong program, strategic storytelling, so people don't just theoretically get where the organisation is going, just from a load of Gantt charts and market share data, but they connect with that emotionally. Unlocking that passion. This is about passion. This is engagement. This isn't a kind of number crunching thing. So also strategic aligned, focused goal setting, really decent, powerful performance management conversation, using your company's values, behaviours as powerful decision-making tools, not just kind of corporate wallpaper and mouse mats. Two-way communications, absolutely vital. And fundamentally, I think you need to embed your key engagement principles, involvement, listening, recognising, into how your senior leaders run your business. So, I've seen some fantastic examples of that recently. An inspirational CEO who she didn't get management consultants in to create strategy. She got cohorts of people within the company to create it. And I have never seen so much ownership and engagement and pride and drive as a result of something. Using your brand manifesto, which I've done recently, to get people really engaged with being brand deliverers and recognising that the brand isn't just about the go and the launch film. It's about tangible action that they can control. And another one around people using sort of innovation tools to get people across the organisation involved in digital pilots. So it's part of the mix, but it is a key part to give sort of rigour and line manager accountability, so not to be dismissed.
Just another question that's come through. It's about the cultural change. So, how did you manage to do the cultural change between the typical annual engagement survey and then your new method? Did your team question the validity of what you'd previously done?
No, I don't think so, because I think people recognise it as on a journey. And you don't just keep with something. You've got to check the whole time whether the tool is working, whether if people are no longer engaged with the way you're doing your survey, you change your survey and get a different one. So I think we look at this. You shouldn't look at your engagement survey separate from your brand and your values and your strategy. You need to look at it all together, and therefore it suddenly starts to make sense. Which is, why have we got a really powerful, exciting question in our engagement survey around our values? Each one. We didn't have that before. We just had generic questions. And suddenly it makes sense to people. Yeah, well, these values are how we get stuff done. These should excite us. Of course, we should be asking questions about it. So I think it was quite an easy change, really, because it was part of that bigger picture. Everything needs to be connected and aligned.
Yeah, there's a useful bit of analysis or model actually we've developed at Questback, which we're really happy to share with people, which is a maturity matrix for employee engagement, and it shows the kind of stages you go through, and it tends to be that start of something that's fairly standard, fairly generic, benchmark driven, outputting scores, and then the next stage on is starting to link up with business output and KPIs. So I think that's really helpful to help you position with your team where you are today and where you want to get to in the future, and that it is a journey.
Yeah, and the survey can provide, particularly for organisations, if you've got line managers that aren't doing performance reviews, they're not understanding what empowering leadership is, they're not recognising and appreciating all these kind of basics. They're not doing that. You can't leap straight to doing something completely new and different. You have to fix it. And there's probably no better tool than the annual engagement survey done right to kind of get the principles of engagement embedded into the organisation before you start looking at this transformation stuff.
And another question that's come through is about incentives. So when getting people to partake in the employee engagement survey, do you think that using employee incentives are effective? For example, a prize draw or something like that?
I've seen it used very well in other areas of employee insight, particularly things like innovation communities, where you've got that idea of people making suggested improvements and getting votes and rankings and ratings from others, which can be something as simple as kudos points, or it can be financial or material recognition. I'm not sure about using it with an annual survey.
I think if you're having to do that, then you have to question whether you've got the right approach and your survey's right. Because actually, we've never had a problem with that, because people see the value from doing it, because we've got all the other stuff around it. So if I do this survey, if I'm, not happy at work or something, I do the survey, I know that's going to help correct that. So yeah, I'm going to want to do the survey. I think if you start launching incentives, it becomes a bit, I don't know, it's almost a little bit trite if you're giving, a prize for completing the survey. What I would say, though, is that you definitely need to hold leaders to account and in a way incentivise through performance management, not on the engagement score, because you can get, score-driven, wrong outcomes, but on the follow-through. So as a leader, you have a responsibility to listen to your people and take action off the back of what they're saying. So, in the past we've linked the kind of follow-through to a leader's goals and therefore performance management conversations. So, you get to the stage where a leader wouldn't get the top performance rating, or the leader wouldn't get a promotion if they were shown not to be an engaging leader, because that was what was required in the organisation. So I think from that point of view, you shouldn't have to involve other people to do this. Right?
Yeah, we on.
I've actually gone on one, sorry, gone on one slide.
I'm over.
Yeah, I'll be really quick on this, but this is a really, really important point, I think. So a lot of the criticism of annual engagement surveys is saying that they don't actually deliver the numbers. And I think actually, if an engagement survey is done incorrectly, you've got either the wrong tool or it's not, you haven't got stuff around it to get value from it, then yeah, it won't. But also, at the beginning when you're selling in the engagement approach, often you use big numbers which are given by all the engagement providers, saying this is going to increase your sales by this and your profits by this. But it's up to you in your organisation to prove that the methodology you're doing is working. So, RSA, we showed the linkage through to NPS, we showed the linkage through to new business, increased efficiency, and also, frankly, how it's much easier to take people through change if they're engaged as well. So we showed the business outcome, but at a granular level that was our stuff, rather than just saying these are the headline stats. And I think to get validity for this and to get buy-in from your senior sort of commercial leaders, you have to be doing this. And to me, the key measure of engagement success is when you had your person who was most cynical at the beginning about, I don't get these surveys, they don't have value, just an HR initiative, all this kind of stuff. When they're coming to you, knocking your door and saying, I need help because I need to engage my people, because they see how it links through to business performance. And finally, and I think the two last points are kind of linked. I've had the opportunity to talk about dropping the annual engagement survey before, but decided not to. And this is why I really counsel against people doing this. Is that right? The engagement survey gives line manager accountability for engaging their teams. Yeah? You get your bespoke report for your team, you can see how you're doing as a leader, you can see how great your team's working together. Take away the engagement survey, and there's a real danger that you lose the rigour in that line manager accountability. So to me, I get my scorecard. I felt a huge responsibility for raising my game as a leader, and I had to really improve about how I did things. I'm not just going to tell my team what to do, I'm going to involve them. That was discussed at my performance reviews, and for my team there's a real pride around this and how we work together. And although I'm in favour of more in the moment ways of measuring engagement, they don't tend to give this accountability and rigour throughout the year, and I think you lose this at your peril. So get the right survey, do it properly, but don't take it away.
In terms of getting the right survey, one of the questions that's come through is, would you recommend doing different versions of the survey for different parts of the business based on their strategy and business outcomes?
Yeah, I would absolutely. And I think the idea of having a central core of questions is important, because you need that comparability, both between business functions and over time as well. So having a core set, we tend to end up with our customers with 3 or 4 key questions. Every survey has those questions in it, right throughout the year, whether it's in the annual survey or other ones. That gives you those sort of temperature check measures and early warning indicators and all that stuff. But beyond that, looking at it different within a business unit, I think makes complete sense. And it's back to this point about it has to be right for your business. It has to link to the strategy and the objectives you've got at the time. So I think absolutely from there. But to embellish that a little bit, you can even think about it personally. At an individual level, because I'm a big fan of this employee journey way of thinking, and the fact that somebody who's a candidate even and not even joined your business yet, they have an opinion on your business, as does a new starter, someone who's been through onboarding, someone who's a newly promoted manager, all the way through somebody who's exiting, and asking questions that reflect their stage in the employee journey is equally valuable, as well as what business units they work with.
I think the person who asked that question made a brilliant point. I think that ultimately you want, let's say, a typical company, but different business divisions, you want divisional leadership team to absolutely own that survey. And if you can involve them in the creation of, focused strategic questions, very much linked to their priorities, brilliant. Of course, you need to advise on some of the key standard engagement drivers. You don't want to lose the stuff around empowerment, recognition, etc., etc. But the piece where you're engaging the provocative questions that challenge your people around certain priorities, yes, I think that's an absolutely brilliant thing to do.
I think it's a great thing you were saying about being able to measure people in their different stages as well, because it allows you to, in one survey, really understand how effective your onboarding is, but also how effective your outplacement is as well. So that's a really interesting point you raised. It's fantastic.
Good. So I think it's me now. So I get to do the fun bit of talking about future trends and exciting things coming up. And there's 5 that I pull out. You can look at it lots of different ways, but what I'll try and do is touch on each of these trends and just give you an example of maybe what one of our existing customers is doing. So we're talking about scheduled continuous here, and this idea of trying to embed it and embed employee insight within the business. So this is maybe moving beyond the annual survey and saying the annual survey as a scheduled event is great, but how do you get that continuity of insight and feedback through the rest of the year? And that might be through other surveys that you run, or like pulses and so on, or it might be by other touch points that you get. But I think there's a real change in thinking from, oh, it's that time of year again, let's do that project and push it out to people, into something which becomes more embedded, bringing dynamism to it by updating it periodically is an important thing to do. We've kind of covered it, I think. This one's really interesting. This idea of monologue and dialogue, and just sort of build it up here with lots of different examples of how it's done. But if you think in most situations, the employee has to wait to be asked to give their feedback, which is slightly incongruous. You think about how we work in our personal lives, eBay or whatever it is, any kind of example of the sharing economy that we live in. So we're seeing quite a few organisations extend out beyond the standard monologue way of gathering feedback into much more of a dialogue. And we use this ourselves at Questback. The screenshot you can see there is actually from a thing called MySay, which is our own internal application that sits on everyone's phone. And you can at any point in time give feedback. They're essentially the same questions that you have within an engagement survey, but segmented down, so you can just comment on a particular topic, and the ratings are visible and used all the time there. And I use this every Monday morning with my team in the UK about what's happening, suggestions coming up, and what the trend lines are for things like work-life balance and onboarding and so on. A good place to start with it, though, is a community. Sainsbury's, I think, is a great example of this. They've got an employee community which has, I think, 70, 80,000 people on it, and it gives them the chance to start a dialogue and to initiate some discussion around a topic. And what it generates is a lot of qualitative data, verbatim comments rather than scores. But if you have the technology to analyse that, then you can get real valuable insight out of that. And I think where we're headed, last picture, the Apple Watch there is, how you doing today?
I'm looking at my very old-fashioned watch, getting a bit embarrassed.
But why not? That would be valuable data you think about as a business manager. Would you like to know that every day as people are sitting down to have a cup of coffee in the morning?
It's quite similar to when you leave an airport these days and they just have the tap.
Yes. Yeah.
Tell you how was your experience. Because getting customers or users of an airport to sit down and fill out survey, it's not going to happen. So just having a gamification with the buttons.
I think the point here, which is obviously, Paul, in your company, you're taking ownership for this. When you come in and if you saw you weren't happy, you get them together, wouldn't you, do something about it? So I think sometimes when you go to an airport and you click the I'm not happy or something, you kind of think, why did I do that? Because it's still not great next time I go next year. So what's happened? So I think the point around if you have the ads and you're getting feedback, make sure that someone or people are accountable for acting on it. Otherwise, as soon as it becomes bad.
Yeah, no, agreed. Just as a final point on that, I think there's some useful exercises to be had by thinking about employee experience in the same way as we think about customer experience. Yeah, and if you think about how digital technology came along to customer experience, first thing was, oh, we can save lots of money. So it was all self-service and get rid of customer interaction. And then the next thing was more, actually, we can find out a lot about people and use that to encourage them to buy more and buy more often. So it switched from self-service to customer experience. And I think we're on the cusp of a similar thing in employee experience. One for another day, I think, maybe, Callum. Next webinar. Okay, so siloed to integrated. I think you see these situations where there's lots of feedback exercises going on. So there's maybe the annual engagement survey, but there's also other exercises going on. And you lose the value by not joining them up. You don't get the brand reliant overused music, 360 views, all this kind of thing. But there's sense in it, and I think having a single platform which you can use to pull together all of this data, whether it's score data or verbatim qualitative data, and actually taking it a step further and looking at customer data as well and starting to link up with that. It can be a little bit daunting, but I would really recommend anybody who's responsible for employee insight, if they haven't done already, to go and ask the question of the colleagues in customer insight and say, let's try and join some of this data up. You tend to find it has to be done bottom up rather than top down. You can't take the output scores and correlate so well. You need to be asking the same kinds of questions. But I saw a great example from one of our banking customers the other day, where they're using all of the tablets in the bank branch to get a sense of how was the engagement. And for the colleague, at the end of it, they've got a survey around, were you able to help the customer? And equally, and that's about systems and training and driving action. But equally, the customers being asked the same question: was this person able to help you? Did they seem to want to help you? Did they seem to struggle? And joining the two up is really powerful at identifying the relatively small process change actions, which really, in aggregate, have a pretty big difference.
I think this is the excitement about the sort of evidence-based HR arguments we're seeing come through. And I think the challenge for any organisation, I know, having worked in HR departments before, is, we're just getting to the stage where the systems are allowing us to do that, whereas before it would be such a manual process.
Yeah.
Suddenly the investments are coming in, cloud-based stuff, etc. So you can start to make those correlations.
Yeah. One of my favourites is actually Bank Austria, who, when they went through post-financial crisis, involved customers and employees in the redesigned branch of the future. Effectively, they had to close down a third of their network in response to the financial crisis. But all of their designs around what they were going to do and how they were going to react to it and what the branch of the future would look like were done in an open community discussion with staff in one community and with employees in the other. Sorry, with staff in one side and employees in the other. And it's just an amazing process, and they actually increased customer satisfaction, won various occasions, whilst closing down a third of their branch network. So there's a lot of value in there. And this is a how long am I going to spend on explaining? But just a very quick story. So this is a dashboard example of how you can use this data. So down the right-hand side, you can see some standard annual engagement survey questions. So I would recommend this company to family and friends. I feel proud to work here, these kinds of things. And so you can filter on that. And on the rest of the screen is a sentiment analysis of what people think about certain parts of the business. So the way you might use this would be to filter down based on some annual engagement questions to right back to that first question about the missing middle. So you can use this to filter out people who are really disengaged or super engaged, just to focus in on the middle. And then within that, you can look at the countries, and actually I think this one is clicking on the US and showing us things that annoy people most. In the top right there is facilities, and you can see the trend line on that. And then in the graph at the bottom left, you can see actually something like furnishing an environment is pretty strongly negative, and a high quantity of comments along with working processes. So those two you can then click in and get down to the comments in the bottom right around the specific themes and issues that people have. So you can go all the way into actionable insight, drill down on comparatives of data, which is as technical as, probably too technical. Sorry, get carried away. So just two more. One is benchmarks, and I really see the value in internal benchmarks, unit to unit, and over time as well. Trend lines there, historical benchmarks. I do see some moving away. We've kind of covered it. I think handle with care is something that I've seen with benchmarks. I've seen them used as something that you become an objective rather than a measure. What do you think about it?
Definitely. So, I certainly think in the early stages, benchmarks can be useful, how you're doing versus other organisations, for more generic measures of engagement. But ultimately, this is about engaging your people in your business objectives and strategy. So I think, comparing the rest of the organisation versus top teams, for example, internal benchmarks can be really powerful. So your benchmark, what you're trying to do here is to deliver enhanced performance and retain your top talent, essentially. So that's kind of what you're aiming for. And I think as companies get more mature in the engagement space, they start to feel less need to have this external benchmark comparing ourselves against 14,000 other companies. But how are we doing on our business objectives and engaging our people with that? So it's a journey.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. And final one, and I think this I'll hand over to you, Ollie, just to talk about this one in a bit more detail in a second. But seeing a real trend now of HR and business becoming much closer aligned in how Insight operates, and sort of business buy-in, your analogy of somebody coming and knocking on your door and asking for help. I think when you have a platform or a capability to drill into the data more, and it becomes really valuable for business owners, both at a way of drilling into the data set from the annual engagement survey, but also supplementing that through ad hoc research as well. So actually being able to say to a line of business or a regional manager, you can go and ask a question to a subset of employees almost in real time, to be able to get that sense of what the mood is and the ideas and what the challenges might be, and that can be incredibly useful with business change. And I think you've got a few points to make about that, Ollie. So I'll let you pick up the story.
So just to pause, is there any questions to tackle now before we just move on to 2 or 3 minutes?
Great for answering.
Great. So this is the area, I have to say, when we talk about the future of engagement, that I feel most passionately about. I think partly because of personal experiences about how important this is. So this is the people side of change, and then by change we keep anything from M&A to restructuring to cultural change to IT programs, whatever it may be. And obviously it's become a cliche to say that the world of sort of change is increasing. But I don't know about you, I've been through so many different processes of change, restructurings and whatnot, often feeling a bit bruised as a result. The sad fact is that the rate of change failure remains stubbornly high. So despite hundreds of consultants and a myriad of books on the topic, still, whether you pick McKinsey or IBM, whatever, you tend to find that 70% of change fails to add value or fails to deliver the value it was meant to do. So when managing change, I think most businesses, and I've been there myself, they tend to focus on sort of left brain rational levers around design and delivery, which again, this whole left brain, right brain thinking is a bit of a theme today. And far less attention is paid to the right brain psychology, the sort of people aspects of change. Yeah, to me this is a disaster. time and time again, the core reason cited for the failure of change lies exactly in this kind of more neglected area, particularly around poor communication and poor engagement. And I think to make change successful and importantly sustainable, you simply have to pay proper attention to this bit. If not, you risk not just wasting money by not adding value, but also badly impacting your people. Which is, I just want to show this last. I always love this graphic, but this is research from the CEB, which says that people can take up to 2 years psychologically to come to terms with a badly handled change experience. I've been there myself, and I know many people have as well. And it can break that psychological contract between employer and employee. I'm doing all the other work I'm doing on engagement. And inevitably this can mean that good people leave. This is the some IBM research. So they looked at 1,400 organisations, and interestingly, only 20% of them said they were highly successful at managing change. So again, that links to what I said before. And where it was successful, you can see this is the parts in yellow. The key reasons tend to be around the people side of change, so the honest and timely communication, ownership of change, like that middle management there, and employee involvement. So this is the people side of change. So when we look at the stats of failure, we kind of need to look at this, I think more. And there are multiple tools to make sure you get that part right. Your compelling narrative, actually upskilling leaders to lead through change is really important. But to target the interventions on the change journey, it's really important to have that two-way feedback throughout the change. So you're listening to what's working, and if you do that, your change agents can respond really quickly to keep the change on track. Or frankly, if you're doing the wrong thing, your people are telling you, you can change course. So asking questions like, do your people understand the reasons for the change? Are they getting the right communications? Do they support the change? If not, why not? And there'll be valid reasons. You might have made a mistake in terms of what you're trying to do. What improvement ideas do they have? Are they being supported by their line manager? How's their personal resilience? This personal resilience thing is really important. So what this is about is stopping the number one killer of effective change, and that's organisational silence. We've heard the words before, but reasons for this. Often it's the lack of mechanisms to give feedback, a culture where dissent is almost seen as unhealthy rather than useful and a good thing. Managers at all levels unwilling to pass on negative views. Sometimes you get the cognitive bias, actually often unintentional on the behalf of the change agents. We've got to do our report for the exec team. How are people feeling about stuff? Oh, everyone's fine. And actually on the ground, people are going, this is a disaster. But they're not telling the change agents. And so you're getting the classic examples in the press recently of IT programs where, hundreds of millions wasted. And they go, we tested it, people said it's fine. And then when we actually asked the people, like, no, they didn't ask us. So it's this, really impartial feedback of what people are really thinking about the change can be really invaluable. I think another reason, of course, is lack of trust, which takes me really on to the next slide. So, of course, in an ideal world, people would talk openly as you go through a change about how they felt and how things could be improved. Need that. But realistically, I passionately believe that one of the key communication barriers during change is people's reluctance to say what they really think, even when they're given the opportunity to do so. So sometimes these are driven by worries over job security, and sometimes it's even a politeness thing, not wanting to offend. But it's a persistent feature, I think, within so many organisations. And I'm sure many people on the call, like me, you've been into a meeting where someone's talked about a new restructure or something, and they go, "What do you think?" And you kind of feel you need to say it's fine, so you go, "Oh, that's fine." Then you leave the room, hence the cartoon, and you say what you really think, and it's not fine, but you don't feel able to say that. So that's why I think using employee feedback, pulsing throughout a change, from the planning phase right through to the embedding phase and the key implementation part. What are people thinking? And then you can target those interventions. There might be, we want to help people with resilience. The line managers, the middle line managers in the retail division, we can see on this feedback tool, they're not supporting this. So rather than ignore that and say everything's fine, we go and speak to them and involve them and get them on side. And you can guarantee they'll feel better and actually the change will be more successful. So to me, I guess in summary, the annual engagement survey critical, I think, to get that line manager accountability and ongoing conversations throughout the year. But I think in conjunction with some of these more agile, in the moment ways of pulsing the organisation, particularly through change, it's absolutely vital. So I don't think it's an either or. I think both have their value. But I would say the whole time, link back whatever tools you're using. If you're asking questions, make people involved and accountable when you get the replies.
Yeah, no, I echo that. And I think this is really powerful, this idea of making a tool set available for business managers to capture wisdom or have a dialogue with employees. We had one of our UK customers, and another financial services one, where they did very well with the engagement, and they took this approach around putting the tool in business managers' hands for change programs, and systems, initiatives, and so on. And at the start of the year, we sat down with them, and they reckoned they were going to do 6 to 10 of these engagement programs, and they did close to 30. Because once it happened and people started using it and say, actually, I've got a system change or a reorganisation or a structural change we're going to go through, let's just ask people what they think before, during, and after. It just became part of the process.
That's true engagement. That's engagement in action. It's giving people ownership and a voice through business change to achieve those outcomes. And that, to me, that's what it is.
Yeah. So we're kind of near summary time.
We are near the end. There's one question I think we'll just try and squeeze in to get answered, and that's about the pros and cons of an organisation conducting its own survey versus appointing an external agency. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think it slightly depends on the organisation and again their maturity. So if you've got the capability to be able to create a really powerful engagement survey internally that hits some of those key sort of line manager, leadership effectiveness and team effectiveness areas, and links to your strategy, yes, then do it. Design one, and it will be really powerful if you get it right. But I think if you literally have no experience at all, then you might want to either buy in some capability to help you do it, or look at some of what the engagement providers out there do. So what I'd recommend, is look at the market, really question it though. So when you see these surveys coming, everyone will have their own methodology and their own kind of science behind it. Talk to companies that have used the tools, because fundamentally it has to be about action. And I think that is why many companies are going down the route of their own generic survey providers, and then you can use a platform like a Questback platform to do that. But I think because people are saying we want a short, actionable question set that is right for our business, and actually, being compared with 14,000 other companies is kind of nice, but actually what matters is how we're performing. That's kind of where I'm seeing a bit more of a trend. People are definitely interested in that area now.
Yeah, no, I'd agree.
Excellent. No, it's been a fantastic debate. Just to let everybody know that the recordings and slides will be available. We've had a couple of people ask for that, so do not worry. There will be a reference to go back to. Thank you very much, Paul and Ollie, for joining the webinar. I think it's been really, really interesting. We've had an extreme amount of attendees that I can see, so I'm glad.
Good.
Yeah, we've been tweeting away at the same time as well, so feel free to continue the discussion on Twitter at HR Grapevine. We're using a hashtag there, which is Future of Annual Survey. So feel free to get involved with that if you're still just fired up and have to keep talking about this subject. But again, thank you very much for everyone who's attended, and thank you to our speakers.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.